Hello, everyone. My name is Mark from the Misplay Podcast, and you're listening to Eternal Journey, everyone's favorite Eternal podcast.
Welcome to Eternal Journey, the podcast.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Eternal Journey, the podcast that talks about all things eternal with a focus on limited play. I'm your host, Jedi, and this week on the podcast, we're going to be doing a level up episode where we're going to be talking about timing. That's right, timing is everything in a game of limited, where the timing of one spell could decide the outcome of your game. And we'll have an additional segment where we bring on a very unique Eternal player on the show to interview them and find out what the game means to them. So stay tuned for that. But of course, want to welcome on the show my two good friends coming all the way from sunny Colorado. We have John Holio. How are you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I'm good. Spring's in full effect. My drafts are going great. You know, can't complain about anything. How y'all doing?
Nice. I wish I could say the same thing about drafting, but those goblin drafts are absolutely killing my morale right now.
I mean, I like shiny stuff too, but not quite that much.
Not a shiny fourth color splash. Stand together. Stand strong. Stand strong.
Dude, you should have gotten all those goblin drafts in before today, because now you're going to have an even tougher time playing your cards the way they did the draft pack changes.
Yeah, I just need a break, man. I need a morale boost.
Fair enough.
All right, coming all the way from the West Coast, another good friend, another great drafter, Alex. What's up, brother?
What's up, guys? How's it going today?
I'm excited to be here, man. Got my friends with me. We're gonna be talking Eternal. Life is grand.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, some housekeeping, guys. You can catch us, all three of us, hanging out live at twitch.tv/Jedi_EJ every Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Cube drafting, Goblin drafting, Echoes of Eternity drafting, some constructed stuff. Come hang out, have a good time. Let's all get better at this game together. And if you are unable to catch those live times, you can catch some great limited and constructed content, as well as off-the-wall Eternal content on YouTube, Eternal Journey on YouTube. You can catch all the great stuff there. I am uploading an average of 3 videos a week there. So, of course, once again, try to learn there, as well as several beginner tutorials. This leads us into our shout-out section. So, shout-outs this week. I want to welcome to the Jedi Order, Planal Cleansing, and Laura Dune. Laura Dune, where's that from? Is that StarCraft? That sounds like a Protoss word. Do either of you guys play StarCraft?
I did, but I don't remember that. I
You're-
don't know. It sounds familiar to
right?
me too, and I was
Laura
like trying
Dune.
to place it. I was trying to place
like-
it earlier.
Lorna Dune is like cookies. That's what I thought about, because I like cookies, but I don't know about Laura Dune. Yeah, I don't know about that.
It's got to be something. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll have to ask them when they actually subbed when I was offline. I got the alert when I went online, so I was like, I'm gonna give them a shout out. And then of course,
The sneaky sub.
yep, sneaky. The shout out to Extinction, gifting 7 subs out to some new Jedi recruits. So thank you so much for that, Extinction. I really appreciate it. And then Sandy reached her 9-month resub. So she recently had her knighting ceremony. So welcome back, Sandy. Of course, want to give a slightly off the wall shout out. Shout out to all the other great streamers. Received a ton of raids this week. So absolutely loving the Eternal streaming community. You guys are great. So shout out to, Marvin the Imp, Circa Sparkles, Cassandrath, Mercurial Blue. Who else gave us raids? I felt like so many people. I feel bad. G-Rum, Sammy91. Yeah, we just Eternal streamers. Like, follow them, like them, subscribe, all the good stuff. And then want to give a shout out to Gilead for taking down the QCP Expedition Tournament this past weekend. There was no coverage on it by Direwolf, but everyone still competed, and Gilead took it down, taking first place. And then a shout out to our very own John Holio for making top 64. Congratulations on making day 2, brother. Well done, with your own brew, no less.
That's right. Yeah, thank you. I haven't shared it yet. Probably after the Expedition ECQ in a couple weeks.
Still extremely impressive that you were able to do some minor testing on your own and just take a deck that far, which is awesome. I'm very proud of you.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, that leads us into our pack one, pick one. So, John, you ready to crack a pack here?
Let's do it.
And actually, it works out because I believe this one is submitted by you. So,
yeah, I haven't actually picked yet, but I think I know what I'm going to.
All right, so starting off with the commons, we have Siege Provisions, 2 Justice Relic. Once per turn, you may pay 3 to give one of your units +2/+2 and Endurance this turn. Spellcraft 1, play Endure, makes a unit invulnerable to damage this turn. Entranced Cultist, 1/1 Cultist for 1 Shadow. Summon, give a unit Quick Draw. Corrupted, 1. Sky King Storyteller, 2/3 Oni for 3 Justice. Warcry, Mastery 6. Put an 8/8 Sword of the Sky King into your deck. And Soul Drain Smithing, 2 Fire Slow Spell at common. Draw a weapon from your void. It and each weapon in your deck gets a +1 attack. Triumphant Return. This is a slow spell for 3 Shadow. Draw a unit from your void. It gets a +2/+2. Covetous Stranger, 2/1 Stranger at 2 Fire. When one or more strangers attack their owner, create and draws a treasure trove. Treasure trove is pay 2 power and draw a card at slow speed. Promising Pupil, 2/2 Exalted Unseen for 4 Justice. Mastery 2. Promising Pupil gets a random battle skill. And finally, closing off our commons, we have Rageheart Paladin, the 4/2 Lifesteal Paladin for 5 Justice. And health plus health equal to the highest cost among your relics. Of course, this is not a summon effect, so it adjusts as your relic count goes up and down. So, John, any of these commons, what are we looking at here in the comment section?
Yeah, there's some pretty good comments here. And you know, the Covetous Stranger is premium. So like, if this was your Goblin draft, there's your pick right there. I think that's the most appropriate, shiny Goblin pick in the game because of the theme there. It's like super spot on. And that's first pickable, but I think out of the commons, I'm probably looking at Siege Provisions. I think that's my favorite out of all these for a first pick.
Even coming up over Triumphant Return, because I believe you're one of the people that's a little higher on it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I still only want like one of those generally in my deck, and like Turn Back Time is kind of a replacement style effect too, and it's a little more flexible. So I'm definitely not looking to first pick that almost ever.
Mm-hmm.
I have come up on the Entranced Cultist a bit. And Rageheart Paladin as well, but I think it's still the first Siege Provisions for me.
Yeah, no, the problem with Siege or Paladin, I like Paladin as well. I have come up on it, but you really need to have some relics to make it worth it. And so because of that, I'd rather pick those later than sooner. So I'm with you. Yeah, I like Siege Provisions. I think the sweet spot for me is I like having 2 of them in a deck because late game, being able to spread around +4/+4 and endurance seems pretty strong. So I like having 2 and just consistently getting at least 1. So yeah, I could see that. I think it would have been between Triumphant Return and Siege Provisions for me. Alex, do you have anything to add?
No, I'm pretty much on the same cards. The Paladin's better with the provisions, but I do like the first Siege Provisions over the shiny Stranger.
Okay.
For sure.
All right, going into our uncommons, we only really have one that stands out to me here. First off, we have Touch of Wild. 3 Primal Fast Spell. Give one of your units Overwhelm. Then give a unit, weapon, or spell in your hand Overwhelm. Unity Within. 2 cost neutral spell. Slow Speed. Give one of your units and each of your units that share a type with it +1/+1. And finally, Inner Peace Ascendant. The 1/3 Mystic for 2 time flying. Invulnerable to damage on your turn. And ultimate, pay 4 to draw a relic weapon from your void. Alex, any of these taking out Siege Provisions for you?
Yeah, the Ascendant, I think. I like that guy. It works well with the flying common. Give a unit killer and deadly. And then on your turn, it's, indestructible, basically. So that's really good. It also brings back relics, which is a very time thing to do. So yeah, I'm on the ascendant at this point.
Okay. All right. And John, anything to add on ascendant?
Well, you did say relic weapons, but yeah, it is any relic at all.
Did I say I said relics?
No,
but...
you didn't, Alex. Jedi said that.
Oh.
I just had to like zoom in and double check. I was like, I thought it was any relic, and yeah, that's a very good card. Like, I mean, we thought it was good before we were playing the format, and it's even come up from probably from my initial impression too.
Oh yeah, I mean,
it's so good.
Yeah, Bottled Storm, Waystone, Hook Sword, Create Edge of Prophecy. Yeah.
There, the list goes on.
So good.
Yeah.
Wormstone, it's like it's a 1/3 flyer that can just attack like every turn if it wants to.
Yeah.
And like you said, that precision plunge with it makes it basically busted. Like,
oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah, that's my my pick right now as well.
It's crazy that we don't have any super strong weapons in the format now, since none of them are boosted in the created packs. Because slapping like a cannon or something on this guy would have been insane.
Oh my gosh.
All right, so now I wanted to go ahead and take a minute and make sure we discuss that. So it would probably been inner piece ascendant over siege provisions, and then if that wasn't around siege provisions, but I do think the rare is going to take the cake. This card was already kind of high for us, and after seeing it played, it is extremely powerful. This is Strange Burglar. This is the 5/4 Rogue Stranger for 4 Stone Scar. When a player plays a stranger, their units get +1 this attack this turn. Pay 2, exhaust Strange Burglar, and sacrifice another unit to draw 3 cards and take 3 damage. I mean, yeah, 3 damage means you can't be doing this forever, but man, every time someone needs distillations against me, I feel so horrible, and this thing has a 5/4 body attached to it. Yeah, John.
Yeah, this card's busted. My easiest 7-win deck in the format so far had one of these guys in it. Like, some opponents will literally just concede when you play it, and I can't say they're completely wrong to do so.
Yeah, I mean, it impacts the board in more than one way when it hits the board immediately, and if it just sticks around, like, oh gosh, and it's already, and it's aggressively casted or statted as a 5/4 for 4.
Yeah, and if you're already kind of wide with like some, dorky 2 and 3 drops, and then you play any top deck stranger after you play this guy, buffs your board, like lets things get in there into the red zone that may not normally be able to, and then on top of that, if it was just a dorky fixing stranger you just played, well, you can eat it with the Strange Burglar and draw 3 cards. Like, oh my gosh, this is a busted card.
Alex, any closing statements on a Strange Burglar?
No, just that John should windmill slam it, probably.
I should.
Yeah, and go from there.
Yeah, maybe we'll all go through John's draft together and discuss our picks. But all right, that's going to do it for our Pack 1 Pick 1. So one last thing we want to talk about before we go into our main topic is that Direwolf actually today changed the draft packs a little bit. They were mainly doing it for Expedition. They added the Tales of Horus Traver, remember, to the packs as well as the promotional cards to go, but the draft packs did not see any addition or removal of any cards, but we did see a modification to the weighted cards, and now there's no more ×12 cards, which were all the uncommon strangers in the created packs. Those got dropped down to ×6, and then the fixing strangers went down to ×3. One other note that John had mentioned that I agree with is that Purify went down to ×3 now, right? Or is it not boosted? I just looked at it.
It's not boosted at all anymore. All right.
Yeah, which is actually a huge thing because I was seeing Purifies left and right, and man, it worked out so well. Being 3 damage, being a relevant amount of damage in this format, and then the silence effect tacked onto it. So I think the fixing stranger thing is going to be a slight issue, but not a major one, because we've already established this is more of a 2+ and 3 color format. So I think you just have to take them a little bit higher. But I think not having to see a battle tested stranger or a soaring stranger, 3 of them in packs 2 and 3 every time is going to be a good addition.
Oh no, actually, I'm sorry. Purify just went from 6 to 3.
Okay.
Yeah, and those 12x went to ×3, not ×6.
Oh wow, okay. I saw a couple that were still, when I was going through, I saw a couple that were still ×6, but maybe it was the multicolor ones. Let me see. A Soaring Stranger. Let me double check real quick. No, I don't even see it in the Soaring Stranger. Is still ×6. So yeah, that's weird. So I guess some of them are, I guess we'll have to find out. Either way, we wanted to mention it. Wait, hold on.
What?
This card appears ×6. Yeah, Soaring Stranger, the
My
uncommon.
bad. I think you might just be completely right there. Like, this document I'm looking at cuts off the second star on all of these. So my bad. Yeah.
Let me see. Yeah, and then the Felon Stranger, Horror Stranger, all ×1 or ×3. So yeah, I think all the ×12 strangers got jumped down to ×6, and then all the ×6 strangers went down to ×3. We're seeing a lot. I see a lot of rares that are ×6, but I mean they're rares, so I think that kind of balances out where you're really not gonna see a difference there. But
and like the emblems, I guess, are rares, but those are all boosted now ×3 instead of not boosted.
Wizen Crone is ×6. Maybe Spellcrack's making a comeback.
Yeah, but they also reduced some of the like burn spells and things in here.
And looking at fire, a lot of the weapons got pumped up to ×6, so we might be seeing another diversity of weapons, which is kind of weird because I don't really feel like creation was lacking in weapons. But hey, Retch Raven is ×6. Sweet.
I see Bring Down is now boosted, so it'll be, your flyers will be a little less safe now than maybe they were before.
True.
And Horn of Plenty, I was seeing a lot of those. That's no longer boosted.
Amory's Choice is ×6.
Oh, that's a little scary.
Yeah, just a wee bit. Stone Shell Walker's down to ×3. Yeah, Purify is ×3. Champion Grappler is still not weighted. Sad face. Soul Collector went up to ×6, I think, from ×3.
Yep.
Darwood Prowler, nice. That's a good ×6. Cultist, Dread Hellkite, oh no. Dread Hellkite, Vile Collaborator, and Smoke Dancer. So it looks like they're trying to push dragons again. Those all came up to ×6.
Okay.
Yep. All right, cool. Just wanted to go ahead and mention that, guys. So just something to think about. For you beginner drafters, it's probably not going to be a big deal. Intermediates are probably going to be worried about it somewhat and see a difference. And obviously the more advanced drafters would definitely see it. But all right, guys, that's going to do it for all our preliminary stuff, which means we are going into our main topic, which, as I mentioned earlier, is that timing is everything. Knowing when to use a removal spell, combat trick, bounce spell, or stun effect could make or break a game for you. So in this episode, we're going to be doing all the groundbreaking tips, tricks, and heuristics to help you maximize this fact. As a starting rule of thumb that I don't want to be mentioning over and over again, it's typically the best course of action to wait till the last possible moment to use your spells, because that way you're using the most amount of information and taking the best educated guess as to what to remove and when to use removal. Plus, you have the ability to potentially get a 2-for-1 out of your opponent, but that is the rule, which means it's typically there are ways to find the exception to that rule.
Let me say something already. Like for newer players, that's a really important thing for them. If you're not coming from Magic in particular, waiting until the last possible moment is generally like a good thing. But it's like if you're coming from Magic, you almost have to undo that perception, because in Magic you always wait till the last possible moment. Whereas in Eternal, there's like a surprisingly high number of times where you want to just do something proactively that you normally wouldn't want to do in Magic the Gathering. So that's, it definitely goes both ways. But yeah, like you said, starting rule of thumb, I think you're probably right on track there.
Yeah, you have to consider the windows that you have for opportunities, right? And not like that. If you're trying, and we'll discuss that a little more in depth, but for example, if you're trying to wait, you have to figure out, okay, I want to kill this unit, but I don't want it to attack. Well, you got to look at how many windows you have before it will get the chance to attack. And in Eternal, as soon as you pass the turn to your opponent, the very first thing they could do is attack if they want to. And if they do that, then you will have a chance to respond before damage and blockers, but it was still already used whatever attack trigger it had, or if an attachment went on it, or if a weapon went on it. So
And in a format with strangers, like for example, a stranger that buffs other strangers, you also don't get a window to respond when units are played. So they could buff their whole board of strangers, and when you're sitting there holding your, 2 damage spell, and suddenly they're all out of reach. So it's you just don't get a window in that case.
Yep. So we'll probably end up touching on that lightly as we get to each individual case. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start us off. And we're going to start at the most flexible, which is the unconditional removal. This is typically the most rare thing in draft because they are the most valued type of removal, since it just plain old kills a unit. Typically doesn't matter the faction size, things like that. It just gives you, it says destroy a unit or kill a unit and something like that. So these are the most sought after types of removal because of the fact that you can do it whenever.
Like cremate.
Yeah, cremate. There you go. That's a very good example of that. It even gives it void bounce, so you don't have to worry about recursion. And of course, the cream of the crop, unconditional removal, is at fast speed. Fast speed obviously means that we can do it whenever we want, as long as we have the window of opportunity. So first off, touching on that again, you want to wait to the last possible minute to do this. The reason being is, capitalizing on this, once again, there are exceptions, which we'll discuss. The reason why you want to wait to the very last possible minute is because A, you get to find out, you get as much information as possible on what your opponent's game plan is, whether they're going to deploy other units, they're going to have combat tricks, play a weapon, etc., try to double block and do things like that as well. And so you have the most information to make the best decision possible on when to use your very scarce removal. Another ability to this is you can throw off your opponent's game plan. If they are planning, for example, to attack with unit A and then follow it up by playing XYZ, then you could throw off that plan by then destroying their unit, and now they have to readjust, especially if you capitalize on getting, for example, Warhorn. That triggers when the opponent or that specific unit deals damage to the opponent. You can wait, the opponent can play the Warhorn on their unit, swing, and then you can use something like cremate to take out the unit, getting your 2-for-1 and also ruining your opponent's game plan where they are unable to get their 2/2 Oni that they might have planned on blocking or sacrificing. Like I mentioned, you're able to potentially eat a combat trick, right? If they're attacking their 3/3 into your 3/3, or their 3/3 or 4/4 into your 2/2s, then you can potentially, they'll be like, all right, I don't want to lose my guy, I'm going to use my wind conjuring, and then you can use your cremate to kill their unit in response, and they get not only their unit but also the combat trick out of their hand. And then lastly, there is attack tempo. I'm not necessarily sure if this is 100% the correct term for it, but this is essentially using it to get a unit out of the way proactively, so they have one less blocker and your attacks are able to get in there, not only dealing more damage, but maybe taking out the blocker that prevented that attack altogether. Let's say they have a 4/4 and then 2 2/2s, and you have 2 3/3s. That 4/4 is going to be a clear block, so taking it out pre-combat and then swinging gives your opponent the chance to either chump block, not block, or double block something, and you still have the potential of getting in damage and getting profitable attacks in on the board. Do you have anything to add about that, John?
No, that's a good breakdown. These conditions are going to come up quite a lot, I think, going forward on these on the discussions here. I think you broke down most of the common case scenarios, and I think the last one is a little more, there's it's a little more complicated to know when that's like a good move. Often it's not. It just depends how close to dead your opponent is, and how much this attack is going to matter. Like if that puts them dead on board with one follow-up unit, even if they play a unit, then it's probably a good move. And if you also have more removal in your deck, for example, you just don't want to burn your one conditional removal on a dorky unit when you are not completely sure that that's going to be the winning play, because that's just too risky. But sometimes it is the right play.
I think you summed up great there. It's typically you're going to use that last attack tempo play with your premium removal one. It's your most scarce resource. You want to be very careful when you use it, and it's probably going to be the last or second last time you attack. right, is typically the what you really want to do is make sure that this kind of attack will get your opponent dead.
Mm-hmm.
But that is something to consider as well. This is limited resources type of format, so the how much of this removal you have in your deck is something to consider as well, that we'll talk about here in a moment. For example, if you have 3 seers in your deck, you're a little more inclined of using those seers aggressively than you would if you have only 1 fell ritual. Alex, would you like to talk about the slow speed level of unconditional removal?
Yeah, let's see here. So the things you need to think about when you have a slow speed removal, does the opponent have a possible counter? So you're going to figure out when you're going to play your removal based on the power that your opponent has and what they have available. Are they playing primal? Are they going to be able to, completely counter what you're doing? Does the threat warrant the removal spell? Is it already dead? Can you handle it with basically what you have on board? The units that you have out, are they going to be able to block it effectively? So you don't want to waste your removal on something like that. And then another attack tempo situation, you want to be smart when you're, like John had said, when you're going to be doing this, you want to make sure that it's not very many attacks left. You saw the window where your units can get in and you can like bring lethal within a couple of turns, something like that. Yeah, just basically knowing what your opponent can have and then playing around it. You don't want to basically waste your spell when you can use it effectively on a different turn. Yeah, that's for the slow spells, I guess. Also knowing when there's pauses in the game, when your opponent can respond to you. Because you can pass the turn and your opponent's basically just going to get one window to do stuff.
So you mentioned possible counters, and you mentioned primal. You're talking with primal. You're talking about specifically like a counterspell type effect, like a negate effect, right?
Correct. Like those are in primal mostly, right? The counter.
Sure.
And
There's some shadow
devour
counter type spells, and then there's other things that'll kind of negate your effect in shadow, such as like Jedi just said, devour. Then there's things like Aegis, like Prule's Choice, for example, would negate your removal.
Ooh, good one. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, and then in time you got to worry about things like bounce effects.
Yes. There's also the one-time counter that like works for a turn, basically.
Right. Random. Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about that one because you at least get to play it again. But yeah, like like if they have a bounce and they bounce the unit you're trying to kill with your removal spell, that's probably not great for your plans.
Yeah.
So like everything, but does red have any kind of answer in this regard to an unconditional removal spell? I can't really think of one off the top of my head, but
no, nothing's coming to mind either. Like they have stuff that exhaust. Yeah. They have stuff that exhaust the unit for value, but that's obviously still leaves. It doesn't stop them. Yeah.
So yeah, like basically any other color, and you got to think about like, could they have this? And one easy way to check for things like that is reading pauses leading up to that moment, or just seeing what kind of power they're leaving open each turn, if at all.
Yeah, the tough, I think Shadow is probably the hardest one out of all this, because Devour and Missive and Immortalize all have the very similar characteristics. Mm-hmm. So it's tough to Devour is probably, I mean, I guess Immortalize somewhat negates your removal spell as well, but there's really no way to play around that. Devour you can somewhat, but it's you really have to take a moment to think about it when it comes to slow removal. This is once again unconditional, so you're not worried about them having a pump spell because it's still going to get rid of it. But it's actually more critical because you have the chance to potentially out tempo yourself here, because you have to play the spell on your turn. Sometimes pre-combat, sometimes post-combat. Now you're giving your opponent some information for their turn, so there is a cost, and here sometimes it is worth being a little more aggressive with this removal spells. Once again, you want to assess what your spell can kill and how much removal you have in your deck. But if you have the ability to take out a unit that is a viable threat and they're tapped out or they have no power open, then it's probably a good chance to run it there, even if you think it might be a little premature, just to potentially not get blown out by some form of counter later on.
This is an extra tricky format because we're in a magnificent stranger world, and sometimes they have free spells that can counter your stuff. So you can't really play around that necessarily. But
another thing too is exalted. So sometimes they have a decent exalted unit on the board and they have no other units in play. It might behoove you to try to kill that unit if you think it might be a threat later on. Something like that. Typically like a +1/+1 weapon or quick draw you're not really worried about, but if they can give something flying, something killer, then that might be something you try to be proactive with your removal about.
Mm-hmm.
If your opponent's getting a pause and they have no power, that's a red flag right there for like an Omri's Choice for 0 coming or something like that. So yeah, beware of that. Happened to me. Beware of that.
Right.
Okay, so moving on, speaking about fire comes our damaged base removal. This is not strictly in fire. Other colors do offer various portions of it, like for example shadow, but fire is where we see the most of it. And once again, going back to the most flexible, we will go to fast speed. This is something like Seer, the 2 fire fast spell, deal 3 damage, period. So it can go face, it can go to a unit, it can go to a relic weapon, you name it, it does it. And the biggest thing here is, once again, you want to try to wait to the last possible minute, but it is a very fine line because since this is damage-based removal, it is not unconditional. You do have some more things to worry about, i.e. like combat tricks that could potentially further negate your removal. Here, doing it on your turn might be proactive if you sniff out a possible pump spell, because they can negate your spell by using the pump spell, but they won't be able to kill one of your units or get the damage in if they are on the attack. So this kind of trades a 1-for-1, and that may work in your favor. It may not. For example, if you force them to use like a Wing Conjuring on your Char or something like that. The other thing is, can you make your opponent react first so you can capitalize? So for example, if they're attacking 3/3 into your 2/2. Here, if you block, your opponent is not incentivized to do anything, and you are forced to make the first move, playing your Seer to save your unit. Now, flip the script. If you have, for example, a 3/4 Vorlunk, and they are attacking in with their 3/3. Now, if you block, if nothing happens, then you win combat. So now your opponent is forced that if they want to save their unit and remove your Vorlunk, they have to make the first play, and then in response to that, before the pump spell can make it to their guy, you can kill their unit with the spear or Seer and get the 2-for-1 on your end. So that's why you do have to look and see if they have open power or potential pump spells and or combat tricks. Much like John said, giving a unit Aegis can still negate that effect as well, and then potentially blow out your unit. And then finally, if it is power efficient for the turn, that is something to consider as well, where you're like, well, they're tapped out, so I do want to take out this unit, but that also means that then there's 3 power for this turn I am not able to use. So am I really maximizing my turn that way, or is it worth me leaving the power up for 2 or 3 turns till I have the window for this Seer to be viable? Another consideration to this as well, which is semi-fast speed, is things like Biting Winds, where you have to do it on an attacking unit, so you are forced to leave the power up as well. You have to decide if it is worth you taking the potential tempo or board development setback to leave that power up to kill a unit that still might have a way to survive because it is damage based. Alex, do you have anything to add to damage based removal at fast speed?
Well, the one thing I would say is sometimes the red removal is it gets limited in the sense that it can't deal with bigger units as well as like shadow or some of the other colors like with bounce, because you can deal with bigger units. So you can use your units in combat to like help push your damage spells over the top. You have to trade some units off, but sometimes it's worth it to get the big baddie off the board. So that was the only thing I was going to add on that.
Yeah, of note too, the good thing about it being fast speed is you can use it additionally somewhat as a combat trick, right? You can block their 6/6 with your 3/3, and then at the end of combat finish it off with the Seer. So that's an option.
Exactly.
And if you're attacking with a unit with quick draw, it basically is it's almost the same as a pump spell in that case, because if you reduce that blocker's health to where your quick draw kills it before taking damage, then it's like as if you pumped your guy +3 or whatever in that case.
Yep.
And then to note also, if it has overwhelm and you damage the unit that's blocking, it will go to the opponent instead, right? Doesn't it work that way?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Which is actually great. You guys did a perfect job of describing the same spell at 3 different time speeds. So let's go into, for example, John's example with quick draw, right? If you are attacking with a quick draw unit, you want to use that seer before damage happens so that the quick draw effect will kill the unit before the unit has a chance to crack back. So in that scenario, you will do the spear or seer. I don't know why I keep saying spear. The seer before damage, like blocks are decided and then before damage is dealt. Now going to, for example, Alex's example where you want the overwhelm damage to go through. Well, here you'd wait till after combat damage is dealt so the unit can deal their damage first, removing as much of the unit's defending unit's health as possible, then use the damage spell to kill the unit, and that way you have more damage rolling over with the overwhelm onto the player. And then lastly, you go ahead, John. Were you gonna say something?
I was gonna say that's like if the spell has overwhelm. If your unit has overwhelm, you want to do it the other way, where you want to, damage the unit as much as possible to get your unit's overwhelm damage through all the way.
Like
Yes.
the timing is the same as the
Quick draw example.
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly.
Right.
Yep. And then finally, the other version as well is when you're on defense, like I was saying, and you wanted to combo that with some smaller unit to trade up for a unit. There, typically, you want to wait till after combat damage is done because you can sniff out any pump spells that way. For example, they're attacking with a 6/6. You have a seer and a 3/3. If you block and then before damage seer, the opponent now has the chance to pump their unit, and then you lose the seer and lose your unit, and they keep theirs. If you seer first before blocks, you have the option, and this is based on what you think is in their hand, what you think is your hand. You can seer before blocks are declared and see if they react to it. In most cases, they won't because they're like, my unit's not dead yet. And then you could decide on whether you want to block or not. Not the most optimal play. Typically that works if the seer will kill the unit. If it's, for example, a 6/3, that's a little different. And then lastly, the way that I think is most optimal is you'll block with your 3/3, make it look like a chump block. The 6/6 will take the 3 damage, combat will end, and then before your opponent passes the turn, then you could seer to finish off the unit. That way, if they do have a pump spell, yes, you lost your unit, yes, you lose your spear, but at least you didn't take the additional damage. And sometimes they might play a unit post-combat, and then the power that they were keeping up for that fast spell is now depleted.
Yeah.
Did I explain all that correctly? I felt like I said a lot.
I think so.
Yeah, that sounded good.
One more thing we haven't mentioned about fast damage removal is, and it's counterintuitive, but it goes along with the example I mentioned earlier before we kind of started discussing this topic, where you don't get a response window if the opponent plays like a unit that buffs other units, for example, or a weapon. So if you suspect that let's say they just played a blade crafter, and you don't think they're pulling out some big relic weapon, you think they pulled out like a warhorn or something, for example, for their flyer. I think in a case like that, it's like a liability to try and hold your removal, because by the time you get another window to play your fast speed damage removal, the unit's too big to kill, right? So it's a little counterintuitive, but those are the kind of times where you'd want to just burn it on your turn as if it's a slow speed removal.
Yeah. With that, John, with that, do you want to go ahead and go into the slow speed damage based removal, which also I like to think falls under, or relic weapons fall under this category as well?
Yeah, they definitely do. I mean, a relic weapon is exactly a slow speed damage removal, except that you take some damage in the trade or whatever. But yeah, it's definitely in that category.
Well, it has the potential of being repeatable, I guess, too. So there's a slight trade-off, right?
Sure. Yeah, there's pluses and minuses to the whole thing, but it's definitely in this category. One thing to consider is, does the opponent have a way to counter the damage? And then another thing to consider is, does this further develop your game plan? I think, these are the two big considerations for this, but, because it's slow speed, you mostly are worried about things like combat tricks, like buff, like finest hour type buff spells, right? Things like that. If you're doing a relic weapon attack, you also need to consider things like biting winds, which we mentioned earlier, for example, because those requires you to be attacking, but a relic weapon attack counts as an attack. So those are kind of some of the spells to look out for. Ideally, you want to do these things when the opponent has all their power depleted for the turn. Then it's basically safe to proceed in most cases. Obviously, with like a relic weapon, you're trying to get the most swings possible with the armor you have available. But sometimes, going for that smaller unit first doesn't work out in your favor in the long run. There's a lot of things to consider in those cases, but most of the time you're going to want to try and, protect your weapon for a turn or two while you pick off multiple threats if possible.
Yeah, and kind of get pseudo card advantage that way.
Right. Yeah, that's an ideal scenario. Weapons such as like magma javelin don't normally let you do that, but sometimes there's a power unit on the board for you to pick off first.
There's a lot of shades.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of those charged dragons and things going around in the format. So even if you have the board all gummed up as you pass the turn back, there's still a chance they can take out your weapon. So it's never really a sure thing in this current format, but I mean, most of the time you want to try and maximize that.
Yeah, and then one other thing that might adjust your timing on when you do this as well is especially directly related to relic weapons, is if you somehow have extra armor, right? Giving a relic weapon any extra armor, it could potentially be worth playing it slightly off of tempo to get that additional armor that may be card advantage later on, or if you have a way of recurring it, because it will remember how much armor it gained.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there's also some other like kind of more niche considerations. Like, for example, in this format we have Provoke the Dragons, which is slow 2 damage. But in that case, you'd want to ideally have some dragons in play before you cast it, right, to get the additional effect of your dragons getting berserk. But sometimes, even if you're like, well, I'm going to have a dragon next turn, like sometimes it's not worth the potential upside there, because the downside is that they're going to make that unit out of range of that 2 damage. Like, it's not that hard to do.
Yeah, very good point. That 2 damage is very easy to get outclassed.
Yeah, so these are the kind of things where you got to take those windows often when they're presented.
Yeah, Vara's Favorite is a great example of that, because it's only 1 damage. So anytime you see an X1, you just want to pick it off regardless of whether it's a good or bad unit, because at least you're getting a card off of it.
Yeah, that being said, it's not always right to just burn your Vara's Favor to get the sigil, either. Sometimes that 1 damage is going to actually matter in a turn or two. If it's preventing you from making plays, and you're not hitting your power drops, yeah, I mean, that's a little different. But
especially in this,
I see some people just run it out on 2 regardless of their hand or what the opponent's doing. I don't think that's correct.
Another thing to consider this format specifically is corrupted units, right? So gauging your removal on when to do it to where you might tax your opponent on whether they are able to corrupt the shade or not could be relevant, or removing the shade, primarily things like Blade Crafter and or Rectifier, where you're removing the shade so they don't get the second summon effect, could be relevant as well. Or when they're not going to have especially fast speed, once again, if you're like, okay, if I kill this mid-combat, they're not going to have the power to twist it or to corrupt it, and so they're just going to lose the shade. That's something else to consider as far as when to use this damage-based removal. Okay, going on to our next category is combat tricks. Combat tricks are fast spells by inherent nature because they have to be done in combat, but they buff stats. Things like, for example, Finest Hour, standard +3/+3, or we have Rampage, which is +3/+1, and Overwhelm, and Spiteful Strike, which is +2/+1, and Quick Draw and Lifesteal. So, Alex, break these down for us.
All right, so combat tricks. So let's see. Is the trick worth the card you're going to be removing with it. So you have to use your trick as removal, and you have to decide if that trick is worth that unit. If it's early in the game, probably not. You might want to save this for a little bit later on in the game, unless you're like getting an early unit in that's important, like a Longhorn or a Dragon the Whelp or whatever, something like that. Let's see, does it open up go ahead.
Yeah, typically combat tricks are a little trickier, right? But you have to kind of have adjust combat, but in most cases it's still correct that you want to try to trade up on power. So for example, using a 1-cost Spiteful Strike or Finest Hour to be able to take out like a 4-cost unit is a huge tempo play for you, because you're still able to further develop your board. The flip side to that, much like what Alex was saying, is if you're attacking your 2/2 stranger into their 2/2 stranger, you might not want to burn a Wind Conjuring +4/+4 and 3 power to kill their 2/2. Now, the flip side to that is if it's a Magnificent Stranger, heck yeah, you take that trade. But typically your rule of thumb, the standard, right? Obviously there will be exceptions, is that you want to try to trade up on the power of your combat trick.
I think in all these scenarios, you want to be the one with unit parity or the better unit, right? Like that just makes all these decisions so much simpler. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're on defense and you don't want to be the guy attacking your 2/2 into a 4/4 because you're really telegraphing something there, right?
Yeah, no, that's 100% well put. That's exactly what you want to go for, which is, are you to open up for a potential 2-for-1 with these combat tricks? Like Alex was saying, you want to be the last one to act. You want your opponent to react first, and then you could react in response, and hopefully being the last person to react to get that 2-for-1 action.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see, does it open up a 2-for-1? So is your combat trick going to allow you to remove 2 of their units? So if they're like doing a double block on one of your units to get rid of it, and now your Finest Hour is going to kill both of their units, so that makes it a 2-for-1, and that makes it well worth it for that card. Does it negate opponent's fast spell? Like, is your opponent trying to sear your unit, and they did it not very smartly while you had power up, and you can negate it with your Finest Hour, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they might still attack, but at least you're going to be able to still block and kill their unit or whatever. And then, of course, does your combat trick put your opponent's life total to 0 or more with your A space, and the one that gets through, you kill your opponent off with that. Yeah,
we saw a lot of that in previous formats, primarily a set 6 when they had the amplify cards like Bottoms Up and Mighty Strikes, where yes, you want to use your combat tricks to win combat, but sometimes killing your opponent is winning the ultimate combat. And so that's something to consider as well. Always keep an eye out on having lethal. That is still something that's not, I think the standard should be to try to go for it if you have it and force your opponent to have it, unless you just have a 100% read that they have a combat trick. But that is something to consider as well, because your opponent is trying not to die and they know what they can and cannot block. So if you have read that your opponent, you feel like they might have, for example, an Amory's Choice, and one unit got through, well, you might want to give it a really good, deep, think tank pause on whether you want to spend that combat trick. And then you essentially get 2-for-1 because your opponent bounces that unit back into your hand, which we'll talk about, which will segue into our last section, as well as getting that combat trick out of your hand, and you no longer have lethal on the board. John, do you have anything to add about combat tricks?
No, I think those are all really good, basic considerations of the trick. I can't think of any more ones that come up very often off the top of my head. So. One
other corner case things that just came to mind as well is different. If you are putting your opponent on a combat trick, maybe not you, them, or vice versa, you both have one, take into consideration what combat trick that you are putting them on, and whether it is worth it for you to potentially pull it out of their hand in defense instead of offense. Two good examples of this are, for example, Amory's Choice and Spiteful Strike. Spiteful Strike will still give the lifesteal on defense, but the quick draw will be less relevant on defense than on offense, where the quick draw may make it to where you lose your unit and your combat trick or whatever, and their unit stays alive, versus on defense, that +1 health may not be enough to save their unit. And then Omri's Choice on defense, obviously it bounces your unit, so you still get to keep the card even if it is silenced, versus on offense, it will have overwhelm and +3 additional damage. So that is something to consider as well. Based, something like Finest Hour doesn't matter, right? Either way, it's going to be fine. Same thing with Wind Conjuring. That kind of does a similar thing, whether it's attacking or defending, but there are some combat tricks that their power level does adjust based on whether they're attacking or defending. Sweet. All right, John, you want to take us into our second to last category with bounce effects?
Sure. So bounce effects, by that we mean cards that will return yours or the opponent's unit to their hand. So the first thing to think about there is maybe using it to refresh a unit, such as if you've got like a permanently stunned unit, or your unit has some really powerful or game swinging summon effect. That's worth going down a card for. For example, Rectifier. Sometimes being able to silence a key unit on your opponent's board is exactly what you need at that time. So, that might be a consideration there. Another time you might want to bounce something is to negate an opponent's fast spell. Let's say, you've made an obvious block, maybe like they're attacking you with a 2/2 and you've got a 3/3. Hopefully it's like a 3/3 with a summon effect, so you're not just trading 1 for 1. You get some additional value there, but you're basically forcing them to burn their combat trick if they want to save their guy that's just suicide attacking there. You'll block first, and then when they go to do their pump spell, you just bounce your guy, and that will negate all that combat damage, assuming that unit didn't have overwhelm. And you'll be trading the 1 for 1 card, but then you'll get to play your guy again. A time where that's even better is if, instead of like a buff spell, if they were planning to finish off your unit with some damage based removal, like we talked about earlier, like Seer or even a relic weapon attack. You'd let the damage happen with the combat, and then when they go to do the final blow with that spell, then you bounce your guy, and you're still just doing a 1 for 1 trade as far as the cards go. Less so with a relic weapon attack, like, because you don't affect their weapon, it stays on the board, but hopefully you can deal with it on your turn somehow. But if it was like a Seer or something, it completely negates that. And another time you might want to do it is to get a 2 for 1. Let's say you're attacking them with like a giant guy, like a corpse boom or something, 7/7 attacker, and the opponent has to gang block it with like, let's say 2 2/2s and a 3/3 that they have on board. Well, in that case, your bounce spell can bounce one of their guys, and that means your corpse bloom, kills off their 3/3 and their 2/2 and only takes 5 damage. And yeah, they get that 1 unit back in their hand and get played again. But instead of, trading all 3 of their guys for your 1 guy, you get to keep your giant threat, and they're left with a 2/2. Like, it's a huge trade on cards there and tempo. One more situation is sometimes just to remove a key blocker, just to get some huge swing in. This is an obvious thing when it's going to be lethal, but sometimes, the turn before it might be lethal, it might be worth it just to get a huge attack in. Like if they left 1 chump blocker back for, your army of a few small guys and like 1 big guy, they were planning to chump your guy. That one, 7/7, for example, getting in that turn might make all the difference in you winning next turn in combat easily.
Yeah, so, yeah. Your opponent being at 9 life and your opponent being at 3 life, it dramatically changes the amount of options they have. So sometimes, even if you are potentially going down a card, the tempo gain is just so huge.
Mm-hmm.
Another cool thing too about bounce spells, going back to that tempo play, is you have the potential of resetting your opponent's entire turn, especially if you're able to use a bounce effect on something that used a lot of power at the end of their turn. For example, if your opponent is finally stabilizing, they're about to play, let's say, a Cinder Dragon that costs 6 power, which in most cases is going to take up their entire turn. If before they pass the turn back to you, you are able to pay your 2 remaining power and put that Cinder Dragon back into their hand, you essentially reset their entire turn and negated it. So when it goes back to you, you have fresh power that you're able to deploy other threats, play other spells, and they essentially did nothing to develop their board that turn, which is a huge play on bounce effects.
That's only really good if you're already if you already have great. If you're like not able to get really any attacks in by doing that, all you're basically doing is, drawing a card while they did nothing for the turn. You went down a card, but you get to draw a card. It's like you basically just cycled, right?
Yeah, very good point. Very good point.
Worth it very often, but if you're ahead on board, then yeah, like if doing that gives you a turn that where you get to get in a nice hit, or a go wide attack or anything like that, I think it's going to be worth it a lot of the times. Another thing we didn't mention that bounce effects can do, is removing a weapon from a unit. It just makes them fall off, and the unit goes back in their hand. So that's a nice, clean way of getting rid of weapons that are on units. There's not a ton of that going on in this current draft format, but there's like exalted weapons and things like that. That you really care about removing. So it comes up.
Yeah, no, very good point. Very good point, John.
Anything to add, Alex?
No, we're going to go over next, stun effects, is very similar to bounce effects. I was just thinking about that. You covered everything very well, my friend.
Thanks.
All right, well, start us off on stun effects there, Alex.
So you're not really ever stunning your own stuff, so like it's not going to work in the same way as far as bounce goes, to get value that way. But when you're on the offensive, it works the same when you stun an opponent's unit with the fast spell as if it would if you bounce the weak unit out of a multi-block. So if you're attacking with, the corpse boom, and then they're blocking with a 5/5 and 2 1/1s or whatever, you stun one of the 1/1s, and that move, it's even better than will bounce, I guess. I don't know if that's the same or worse, but what's the same is that it's going to kill both the other units and your 7/7 is going to stay out there. So it works the same in that sense. Slow speed, use it as removal, semi-removal, to basically get in the final damage, or get in a big swing of damage. It's going to basically just put your opponent on the back foot for the rest of the game. And then I don't really understand the sack part of this note here.
It's to be careful of the thing about slow speed stun effects is that it's still vulnerable to bounce effects. So if they bounce it, they play it, it's freshed again. Endurance can negate the stun, and then the unit can still be sacked. Like it's still a unit on the board, so they can still sack it. So it's removal if they die before the unit is not, if the stun wears off, but it is still semi-removal because they have access to that unit in a variety of ways.
One thing to watch out for when you're going for that combat blowout is Wind Conjuring. If they're able to give the unit endurance before your stun resolves, it never comes out of combat. So that can be a blowout. Another thing to watch out for is a common in the format we talked about in the Pack 1 Pick 1 siege provisions.
I was just going to mention it too.
Yeah, that'll ruin your stun game plan completely, and not at fast speed obviously, but just breaks stun effects completely.
Opponents forget that all the time.
They do.
You can do that.
But yeah, I think Wind Conjuring is one of the biggest blowouts for stun effects.
Yeah, especially since it refreshes the unit as well. So if it's like a permafrost, it could do it in mid combat and still block. The one of the other big differences between fast speed stun effects and slow speed is that if you are able to do the fast speed stun effects in the middle of combat, it essentially gives you an extra turn of the unit being stunned, versus slow speed, you're only going to get 1 turn window because it resets, on their turn. So the first time it'll lose the first tick mark, and then on the second time it won't be stunned anymore. Versus if you do it in mid combat, you're kind of getting like an additional turn of stun.
Like,
so
I feel like the slow stuns, like you want to typically use that to help you push that last turn or two of damage through, because like you said, like it comes off faster. The slow one, or I mean, sorry, the fast one is way more useful in Eternal, just generally speaking.
Yeah. And then the last thing, just to be a completionist about it, is exhaust effects, which kind of fall under stun effects. And there's really none in this format that come to mind, really. But, there was the Brigand, right? The Sensari Brigand that twist exhaust the unit, and then the Cinder Yeti, which was just recently added to Expedition, the exhaust unit, where this is 100% you are trying to get as much damage in this turn as possible, because exhaust will just exhaust the unit this turn so it can't block and then get in. So it's a huge tempo swing if, like John mentioned earlier, you have a strong board presence to take advantage of that. If not, you're almost kind of doing nothing. So just something to think about as well. Because I don't even think executes in the format, so you're not even trying to kind of like exhaust something to get the execute off, right?
I don't think so. No.
Yeah.
Was that the exhaust all enemy units? Is that one?
No, that's Cloud of Ash. That's a game ender right there. But that's literally the only time that card is any good, if you're able to end the game with it. If not, it's pretty bad.
Especially when your opponent has a bunch of endurance units. It's really bad.
Yeah. I mean, it gives you a way out. Trust me. I don't mind having one in my deck. And sometimes there've been a couple of draft games where I got my opponent to like 8 and they completely stabilized, and they can't attack into me because I have all this aggressive units. So we're just standstill. I'm like, I just need to draw Cloud of Ash. And I draw it, exhaust all their guys and swing. So, but other times when you have one unit on the board and you draw it, you're like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like most similar to the slow stun. Like you typically want to use it like as one of your last moves in the game.
All right. Well, that wraps up all our combat trick speeds and more or less when to use them without overloading your brains. Alex, do you have any closing statements on this topic?
No, other than just today I was like picking your guys' brain. Just as a new player, try to like focus on when the pauses are, like when you get to respond. It'll help you out, I think.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely, like John had mentioned several times on the show, when you're sitting there holding that seer, trying to figure out if you want to take out that Magnificent Stranger or not, chances are, if you have the slightest inkling that thing could get 4 health or 5 health or something next turn, then just do it now. And also don't give him the window to attack and trigger it. So,
yeah.
Exactly.
The thing that was hardest for me to kind of get in my head in Eternal was like, using fast spells on my turn, right? Like coming from Magic the Gathering, that was a hard thing to learn. Because in Magic, it is literally never correct to do a fast speed thing just like when you have priority,
Right.
like
Untapped player, like a tap player, right?
I like, I got my draft chops in Defiance mostly, and man, that was a very weapon heavy format, and it only took so many times of me sitting there with my like conflagrate or something, like I'm gonna do it to this unit, but I'm gonna do it when they attack, because I'm thinking Magic stuff, right? No, they just threw a weapon on it, and my conflag did nothing for the rest of the game. That happened a number of times before I finally got it into my head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty much what we were harping about, is that you want to be the last one to react. You want to force your opponent to react first. And if you have that, especially, not killing a unit that's already dead. So if you have a 3/4 on the board, you have that conflag in your hand against their 3/3, you have the ability to. Now, if it's the other way around, if you're the one with the 3/3 and they have, the 4/4 or whatever, then you know what, just use the Fel Ritual, before they have a chance to make it any worse, and just save yourself the potential blowout, because that's happened to me too. I'm like, I'll wait a turn, and then I get wrecked. So yeah, definitely. Any other closing statements, John?
No, I'm sure we didn't cover literally everything, but I think that was a pretty good mid-level breakdown, I guess, of when and how to use most of these eternal moves.
All right, sweet guys, that's gonna do it for our main topic. So with that, we have a special interview for you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, with me on the line, I have a friend of mine and fellow streamer and eternal player. I have Sammy91. How are you doing, Sammy?
Good, my friend. Good. Good to be here.
Glad to have you. Thanks for taking time out of your day to let me interview you a little bit.
No problem.
So tell us a little bit about you. What brought you to Eternal, and what's your favorite way to play it?
Well, first, let me give you some background on how I found Eternal, because that would make more sense, right?
Please do. Please do.
I've been playing Magic for 15 years. And then one of my friends introduced me to Eternal.
Nice.
And after watching him, I decided to give it a shot.
Did you find it was pretty easy to pick up the game after having so many years of experience playing Magic?
Absolutely.
So, very important question. Was the tutorial too long for you, or was it all right?
It was all right.
Okay, because I know that's a big source.
The tutorial is all right, but for some people it might be a little difficult. But for my standards, it was okay.
Okay. And do you still play Magic at all, or are you exclusive to Eternal now?
I still dabble from time to time, but the more I look into Eternal, the more engrossed I become in it.
Yeah, I can understand that. I feel the same way. Yeah, I'm practically borderline exclusive to Eternal at this point because I just enjoy the game so much. So, what's your favorite way to play Eternal?
Like a favorite mode, or
yeah, favorite mode.
Right now would have to be a tie between Gauntlet and Throne. Just for start off.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not too good at draft yet, but I'm slowly learning the mechanics and how each card affects one another.
Okay, and what do you like to play in Throne right now?
I'm currently using a Skycrag Dragon deck right now.
Ooh, interesting. So you shifted gears off of Feln from the last time we spoke, huh?
Yes. But I still have Feln if I need it there, right?
Yep, true. So what kind of Skycrag Dragon brew do you have?
I'd say it's mostly power related.
Okay.
And mostly control related. So we've got a mixture between control and overwhelming my opponent with flyers.
Nice. Are you running any of the new dragons from the latest set, or are they all the old school ones?
Right now it's the old school ones, but as I go through, I might swap them out, depending on what the needs are.
Yeah, understandable. I mean, no deck is ever 100% done, right? It's constantly evolving based on your collection and the meta game and whatnot, so.
And I don't have that many cards yet. I believe I'm all over the place with deck percentages.
It happens to the best of us, trust me. The only reason why I have such a collection is because I draft so much. So I'm pretty sure it takes a little bit to build up your collection. Then obviously you adding another faction to your primary would definitely skew your collection a little bit.
Absolutely.
Right. So, Sammy, you and I had talked about bringing you on the show because there's actually something quite unique about you. And I wanted to wait to get to know you first because you're identified by you and who you are and not the potential dis-ease that you have adjust your life to having. But that is one of the reasons why we wanted to bring you on the show, because there's a good chance that you are not the only person that found enjoyment in the community of Eternal as well as the game, even through this level of dis-ease. So if you don't mind, can you go ahead and explain that to our listeners?
I'm a quadriplegic, which means I only have function in one arm. Both my legs are affected, and one of my arms is affected, my right one. Now, we call this quadriplegia, but the disease I have is cerebral palsy, which is a birth defect.
Got it. And so you've been dealing with this your entire life, correct?
Entire life.
Okay. And so you found Magic. Now, when you were playing Magic, was it on paper, cardboard as well, tabletop, or did you immediately start on a digital platform?
I immediately started with digital, but then I moved into paper and went back to digital.
Okay, so when you saw the transition going to Eternal it was pretty much a welcome sight, right? It was anything new that you hadn't experienced already. You just realized that it was being a digital platform a little more convenient for you?
And more user-friendly, but I do have some gripes and changes I would like to see.
Oh, really? Okay, so we'll get into that in a moment. I do definitely want to hear your take on this. So now that you are dealing with Eternal, tell us a little bit about what keeps you coming back to Eternal and the enjoyment you have playing this game versus like other options you have. The strategy?
And it's a lot less toxic than any other card game I've realized.
Yeah,
with Magic, like, there's just this toxicity that I just can't stand it. It's like if I were to go into Magic the Gathering Arena right now against someone that is like a pro, I just get wiped, talked down to, and that's not a community I would like to be a part of. You know?
Yeah, I can't deny the positivity that we spread here at the Eternal community. I think I'm not sure if it comes from how small and tight-knit group we are, that more or less everyone knows everyone, whether they just see the name on ladder or they know from content creation and various things like that, or Reddit and Discords. But the community is overall extremely positive. We all lift each other up and really just want to promote this great game. So I can understand where you feel like you're still going to get the strategery and the gameplay excitement, but you get an added bonus of also having a bunch of great friends and people that you can interact with. And so
it's all been so welcoming.
And that's fantastic. And do you find that is that a little more unique to your situation, or is that something that maybe like 50-50 or something you're used to? Because I'm sure there's other people that have had to overcome the social aspects as well as dealing with the disease, correct?
Yes. For me, while I've always been a forefront for disabilities, like I've been giving talks and things since I was 12 years old. So
oh, wow.
It's like, I work for a hospital as a volunteer, all in Blurvy Kids Rehab. I've been there since I was 16 years old.
That's really impressive. Wow, I learned something new today.
Right. And when they need me, they either email me, they need me to come in for something, right? Or just an extra hand to have on hand. And now I'm working in the R&D department. research and development department.
Well, that's super cool. What exactly do you do there?
I make video games for people like me who have physical or mental challenges. But right now, it's just therapy games.
So that's actually a great segue into something you led at earlier, which was your suggestions for potential improvement on the game and the environment. So why don't you go ahead and let us have it? What ideas do you have now that you have, you know, not only life experience but as well as a bit of background R&D?
Well, where can I begin? As a new player, like that barrier to entry is quite high. You know what I mean? Like for the quest lines, I mean, the game's great, don't get me wrong. But the barrier to entry for those quests need to be dropped by 1,000.
Okay. And in particular, what do you mean as far as details? Like the
gold requirement.
Okay.
Because I'm actually physically going places and telling people, you know, you gotta try Eternal.
Mm-hmm.
And they get immediately turned off because they see 25,000 gold for a quest line.
Okay, and the game forgive me, it's been a while since I've done the beginning parts, but the game didn't facilitate, like, essentially giving you the gold for that first run of those things, or no?
They did, but as I was getting through it, like, I was trying to save my gold for packs and things.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because I needed to build my deck collection, right? Or card collection.
Yeah, correct. It's a struggle everyone goes through for sure, especially in Constructed.
So, unfortunately, I had to pay for all campaigns, which is not a problem. But for people that don't have the money, it's kind of cutting the enjoyment down.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it will turn people off from it, I fear. Now, that's just my personal take on it.
Mm-hmm.
You can take it with a grain of salt or not.
Okay. Yeah, maybe do something where there's like a certain, like, maybe for your first 2 or 3 attempts of something, the gold is at, or the cost is at a huge discount while you're still in that entry level of the game, and then once you hit a certain amount, it goes up to standard prices. I could see that being a thing.
Agreed. Like, for the first week or so, maybe, or maybe your first 5 days, they could lower the prices down to 1,000.
Yeah, I mean, there's always
15,000.
Yeah, there'd always be room for exploitation. Some people that don't necessarily care about building collection might just continuously make new accounts and things like that. But it's still something to think about. I mean, I think that's kind of probably not a thing because most people probably do want to build an account, minus the ones that just strictly draft. They probably don't really care about building a collection, but, you know, it happens. What are some of the other suggestions that you have for Eternal to improve?
For the breakdown system, you know, I've tried to break down all my shinies because they essentially do the same thing, but I'd have to individually click on every single one of them, and the tediousness is tiring to me.
Mm-hmm. So kind of like a quality of life improvement type thing?
Yeah. So what I'm suggesting is for Direwolf Digital is make it possible to select all your cards at once and just say destroy. But just for the premium ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think you're alone on that. I think there's a lot of people I constantly see a message in Reddit occasionally about something similar feature like that. I definitely think it's a quality of life thing that's on their radar because multiple people brought it up. So that makes a lot of sense. And then obviously the UI being slightly more difficult for you to use than the average viewer, anything that makes it a little bit smoother is definitely a huge benefit.
And I'm a huge believer in ease of access to any game that I play. And Eternal definitely fits the bill.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I like everything else about it. I like the community. It's been very welcoming to begin with. Because, let me tell you, some of the friends I made while playing Eternal,
Mm-hmm.
I can already tell are going to be lifelong friends.
Man, that's absolutely awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. That's fantastic. So you already mentioned that you do volunteer at the hospital, helping other people with disabilities and things like that to improve. And, you know, like I said, I'm sure you're not the only person that plays Eternal that is dealing with some type of issue on their own, or players that have friends that are dealing with disabilities and diseases as well. So what advice do you have for both the actual players and then the people that have friends that they could bring the Eternal, or at least, yeah, just in general, what kind of advice do you have to give to them that they can share or improve their own quality of life?
Because let's face it, many people like us, apart from, you know, our lives particularly, stay online. But, you know, because that's the easiest for us.
Mm-hmm.
But other people, you know, might take advantage of that when you're playing, say, Magic the Gathering. You won't get that here with Eternal. Everyone is welcoming. And I'm telling you right now, if you play Eternal, be prepared for some friendly and credible people.
Well, that's definitely a high commendation. So the biggest thing is just you feel like it's an even playing field for everyone, regardless of who's on either side of the battlefield.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's spectacular.
Now, there are some cards that I think could use some tweaking, and I know that Direwolf Digital is on that all the time, which I am thankful for.
Yeah, they do. I feel like they've done a very good job, at least here, especially recently, of keeping a pulse on what the community feels about certain cards and trying to keep the formats healthy.
And if there's at any point, Direwolf Digital could add like a voice recognition to the thing. Like, I want to be able to say, you know, play card number 2 or card number 4, or, you know, and the game would automatically go and do it.
Oh yeah, I could definitely see that being a huge help for people. Yeah, I like a voice, like you said, voice recognition and UI navigation or interaction. Yeah, I could interface. There you go. Yeah,
yeah. That's just a few things I've noticed that could really help boost the game.
Yeah, it'd be a little difficult. I think it would require a lot of programming, because I'm thinking of combat, deciding on how to block and things like that might be a little difficult. But yeah, I could see that being a huge help, bridging the gap for people that may find playing games a little bit tougher, you know. And so a more user-friendly interface would definitely make a world of difference, I think, and another quality of life improvement.
Yes, because I'm constantly looking at things like that. And, you know, I've started realizing all the games I play have a lot of issues that I bring up that don't actually get looked at by the developers unless there's a really big stink about it. But I can tell something's different about Eternal. And I don't feel that way with any other game.
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad you found a home, man. Because, like I said, I'm enjoying this game quite a bit too. So every time I hear other people really find it to be a happy place and kind of do everything that they want to do, is just so rewarding. It makes it easier to definitely push this game. So speaking of pushing the game, like you've been doing in real life, you recently began streaming. So how's that going for you?
Absolutely incredible. My first day of streaming Eternal, I had 99 follows. Now I'm up to 108.
That's awesome. Congratulations, man. That's faster growth than I even saw. So good job. Kudos to you.
Yeah. It's all about just, getting your name out there and make sure people know what you're doing. I do have a YouTube channel myself.
All right, well, yeah, plug them both in.
It's One-Handed Media is the YouTube channel.
Okay, One-Handed Media.
I will get the link for you.
All right,
later.
Yeah, I'll add it to the show notes. And then what's your Twitch handle?
What's my what?
Your screen name on Twitch?
It's Sammy 91.
All right, so SAMMY 91 on twitch.tv. Nice.
And I'm always talking about you to other Eternal streamers.
Oh, you're too kind. You don't have to do that, but I appreciate that. You're way too kind to me, friend.
And I really enjoy your content. Really do, man.
Well, I'm glad.
I learned so much about draft and other mechanics. And for new players, it might seem daunting, but don't worry. We as new players have each other's back. I've been only playing for 6 months.
Yeah,
and I've made some great friends.
Well, that's awesome.
Don't be afraid to reach out to other people. Because I know people with disabilities don't get the chance to reach out. Some of them are quite shy, and a game like this could help that.
And all the more
shyness.
And all the more reason to share it. Yeah.
When I'm playing a game, I don't feel afraid. Like if I was just talking to someone, I would be kind of sheltered off.
Gotcha. Yeah, I could see that being intimidating, especially with a bunch of strangers.
Yeah. When I'm in a shopping mall, I hate crowds.
Yeah, don't feel bad. I can't stand shopping malls either, so I'm right there with you, buddy. Right there with you.
It's not what they're going to do to me. It's what crazy antics they can get into. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you've been in my stream. I punt plenty of times, so sometimes we end up being our own worst enemies.
Because I've had people fall in my lap. I'll tell you a story, right?
Yeah.
So I was driving in the mall. Say, use a power wheelchair, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was looking straight ahead, right? Minding my own business, looking where I was going, and this guy comes up and falls into my lap. Like, literally wasn't watching what he was doing, looking on his phone. And I'm like, hey, bud, can you get off me, please?
Wow, that's
It was
crazy.
And it was like, oh, jeez. Sorry, dude.
Yeah, I'm sure it took him a minute to figure out what was going on, especially if he was just knee deep in his phone. Nice.
Yeah.
All right, well, Sammy, I think we're gonna wrap it up there, bud. I really just wanted to thank you for taking the time to be on the show. I know we had talked about you getting on the show a little bit sooner, but it was right in the middle of all the set reviews for the new set, so we had to postpone a little bit. But appreciate your patience and yeah, just taking the time to come on the show. It's been great having you, and I really hope that people share this interview with their friends and stuff to just bring more people to Eternal and grow our positive and just friendly community.
It is really friendly.
So yeah, thanks. So like I said, I'll add your stuff on the show notes so people can definitely check you out. Do you have any final words before we go?
And guys, this game is going to do great things. But like I tell other people, keep a lookout, because you never know what friend you're going to make. Or, or just if you're having a hard day, talk to someone, because in the end of the day, mental health is very important. I cannot stress that enough. But as I say in Eternal, keep the fighting spirit up and your cards played.
So this leads us into our What's the Play for the week. And let me tell you, we have a doozy of one. In fact, I roped when I was doing this in game. So our opponent is Creation with 1 power up. We are Destruction with 4 power. Our opponent's at 25. We're at 21. Our opponent has a 2/1 Covetous Stranger and a silenced 5/5. We just talked about it. The Overwhelm Sentinel for 5.
Stone Shell Walker.
Thank you, Stone Shell Walker. We have a 0/1 Emithril Wisp with the +1 Overwhelm weapon on it from Markmaker, and a 2/1 Rectifier, which obviously silenced the Stone Shell Walker. In our hand, we have 2 Nahid's Faithfuls, the 2/1 Lifesteal, sacrifice a unit to get a +2/+2, and it is 1 cost. We have a Disjunction, the 2 cost fastball, destroy a weapon or attachment, or get an attachment back from the void. A Mysterious Waystone, 5 Shadow. At the end of your opponent's turn, it deals 1 damage to them and you gain 1 life, and every time you sack a unit, this goes up by 1. A Sunset Enforcer, yeah, that sounds about right. Sunset Enforcer, which is the 5/5 for 6 time, and it has Pledge, which doesn't matter. And then whenever you sacrifice a unit, you give Sunset Enforcer a +2/+2 permanently. And then finally, Display of Destruction, which is 3 destruction. And you have 3 options: A, deal 3 damage and gain 3 life at fast speed, and it's to an enemy, so it could go face, relic weapon, or unit. Play 3 1/1 Exhausted Cultists, and or sacrifice unit to gain 3 power this turn. All right, so I believe we started off with John last time. So Alex, what do you want to do here?
Well, so there's a few things you can do aside from being, the unfortunate coincidence of not being able to play your Mysterious Waystone before you kind of go off on some discarding stuff. But I think the play for me here would be to sacrifice probably the, how do you say that, ephemeral
Yeah.
width?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. To the Destruction, what is it? What are those?
Display.
The Display of Destruction. There you go. To get basically 7 power on board. And then I would play the 5/5.
Sunset Enforcer. Mm-hmm.
Sunset Enforcer that's going to get a pump now when you sacrifice the rectifier with one of the Nahid's Faithful, so that you have a 7/7 on board and a 4/3 life steal on board. And then I would take that line instead of like waiting to react to my opponent's attack and in fear of getting blown out by a combat trick or something with the double block, or planning on killing it while it's attacking. I think I would just rather improve my board presence instead.
Okay. One slight modification to that, which it happened to me, is that despite the fact that Mephro Wisp comes back, you actually do want to end up sacking the rectifier. The reason being is you have to sack the rectifier anyways to get your double sack right for the turn. One for the display and one for the Nahid's Faithful. But you're not going to have the power to be able to corrupt the shade for the rectifier. So you're actually better off just sacking both sides of the rectifier, so you still have the 1/1 to block if you need to. At the end of it. So it's just a little more efficient, and it's one of those things you may not see right off the cuff. Like I said, it caught me too. I was roping by the time I did this because I was streaming and talking through my plays. All right, so before I go into it, John, what play are you thinking about doing here?
No, I think that's exactly what I would do. It's a really good point about not doing the Wisp, even though it's a free sack, because the rectifier is even more free. And you don't have the power in your hand. You might not draw it next turn, to get the Wisp back. And like, if the opponent is acting crazy and decides to come at you with their 2/1 and their 5/5, despite you having 2 larger units next turn, like that lets you just block one with the Wisp and not take any chances while your shields are down with no power available. Mm-hmm. So I think that's definitely the play here.
Yeah. Though, I mean, I was hoping one of us would have a different line, but yeah, that was actually the line I took. And like I said, I did initially what Alex had mentioned, just because I was roping at the time. So I just immediately sacked the Wisp, and that was incorrect. Once I did it, I was like, oh yeah, the rectifier I can't silence, because I was hoping to silence too, but you just don't have the power. Now, a couple other lines that I saw that did come on the board here for me is to potentially just sack both of the rectifiers, or at the very least a rectifier. So another line you could do, sorry, let me clear this up. Another line you could do is play both Faithfuls here, sacrificing a rectifier and the Wisp to make them both 4/3 lifesteals, and then you have the 2 power left over to silence the Covetous Stranger with the Shade, and then you have 2 4/3s that can either block the Covetous Stranger or double block the Stoneshell Walker, and then you lose a Faithful, but you have a Faithful. Another option, and then you still keep the display up. Because the display is up, another option you have as well is to play 1 Faithful and either sack either unit, and then that way if they attack with the Stoneshell Walker, I'd probably sack the Wisp here. If they attack with the Stoneshell Walker, you are able to block with your rectifier and then finish it off with display, doing 3 damage, gain 3. And then that way you can get some value there, and you're still keeping another Faithful and the Sunset Priest and in your hand, and you're getting the Stoneshell Walker off the board. So those are the other 2 lines I'm looking at. Let me make sure there's not a third line or anything. I guess if you really wanted to push it, another line would be just to make the 3 Exhausted Cultists and then play the 2 Faithfuls, and then that way you have 4 or 5 units on the board. That's another consideration. Where you can chump block and things like that. So you have a couple options thanks to display. But and now in hindsight, I almost wonder, I don't remember how this game played out, but now I'm wondering, I think maybe I should have done that. It's potentially, they weren't going to attack with the Covetous Stranger because the 1/1 Wisp was holding it off, but I think maybe using the display to combo with the rectifier to kill the Stoneshell Walker would have worked out. I don't remember what happened after the fact, but we did. We ended up taking the line that you both said, where we just used the display sacking unit to go up to 7 power, and then played the Sunset Enforcer, and then made it a 7/7 with the sack trigger off of the Nahid's Faithful.
So there's a couple reasons why I think that's like, I don't know if correct is the way to describe it, but I think it's just
most optimal. Maybe
I think it's like, it's less risky. It's like better. There's a few reasons why I think it's better than those other lines. It puts both of your units that are on board just straight up bigger than the 2 that the opponent has, which is always like a good position to be in. It reduces the risk of, they're in creation colors, so they're probably going to have either some damage based removal in the form of, sears or relic weapons. And if you've just got a 4/3 on the board, well, any weapon takes one of those out, and then they still get to attack you with their big guy. Whereas a 7/7 staring these guys down, the opponent's options are much more limited in that case in their colors. Some other reasons are you're basically burning out your entire hand's worth of sacrifice options when you're sitting there staring at a waystone, right? So having that other Nahid's Faithful in your hand will give you a future, like, guaranteed sacrifice effect. If you hit that power, obviously your Wisp will come back either way. And that'll let you buff the Enforcer more, get your Waystone online, things like that. So those are the reasons why I really think that the line we were saying here is the most optimal one.
Yeah. Anything to add in closing, Alex?
No.
Sweet.
I think we nailed it.
All right. Sweet, guys. Once again, you can check out the picture of it on YouTube as well as in the Discord. All right, so that's going to lead us into our final segment, which is Constructed Corner. And this week I took a brew of my own, which is, I still want to say it's Combre Ramp, because I'm splashing fire for literally 1 card times 3, I guess, which we came up with in testing to help us against 2 matchups, and it ends up working out really well. Shout out to Dub Mike and Pook. Oh shoot, is it Pook 86? Pook 89? Hold on.
Pook.
Yeah, it's Pook. It's Pook. I know, but I wanted to say their full name. Like we just call him Pook. But hold on.
Shout out to the whole order for helping with tune this brew. That was super fun the other day.
Yeah, actually, Death was in there as well as Dire Snail. We had I think
Jim Joe also.
Sizzle.
Jim
yeah,
Joe.
yeah. Actually, yeah, we had the whole order working on there.
Tempest Dragon King showed up for a minute there.
Oh, even in Discord, it's just Pook. Okay, cool. It's in game. Sweet. All right, yeah. So shout out to the Jedi Order to help me test. This was something I was testing with John quietly behind the scenes, and then finally we discussed about it, and we needed just some more reps. So I shared it with the Order, and they came out in full force. We kind of kicked it with everyone in chat or voice, which was a lot of fun. And yeah, we came up with this thing, and the deck performed extremely well. It is an expedition deck. It has a medium to bad matchup against Carver. And I say that it probably might be a little bit better since we added the fire to it and the unmakes. I didn't really get a chance to play it all that often. I didn't see it at all in the CQ or what is it? CQ.
It was a QCP tournament.
QCP tournament.
Yeah.
And but it's a really good matchup against Xenon Strangers. It's pretty good against Creation actually because we're a little bit bigger than them. And especially since it is a good matchup against Creation since we splashed fire and made a couple adjustments. But anywho, the deck's a lot of fun. It's pretty much just Combre that you're used to seeing for the most part. It just tops off with 2 Martyr's Chains and 2 Pit of La Noctas, which just makes it awesome. Like you guys that were on there seeing screenshots and some of the gameplay where if you get a Pit and a chains in play, like you're ridiculous. You have a 12/12 stranger with 2 14/14 worms that all have exalted, and yeah, it's a bad day for your opponent. So the deck
and when those worms are all exalted from your Grodov's Burden, it's extra spooky.
Yeah, it's just the deck is an absolute ton of fun to play. So I enjoyed it, and I do think it's decent. It's actually pretty good against flyers as well because you're running 8 board wipes in the form of Shinra Speaks and Age-Worn Vestige, and Vestige just kind of allows you to smack their flyers before they get big. I also run 3 Wasps to help with that as well, and 2 Unmakes. So real quick, let's go through the deck list, I guess, without further ado. And then, of course, in the show notes, you guys will have the deck list as well if you want to click it and play it. I don't necessarily think it's all that expensive, but it could be. Anywho, I'm doing this by, let me just put it into other order. It works a little awkward with the people watching on YouTube, but
it's around 64,000 Shiftstone, if you're wondering.
Oh yeah, there you go. 62,080. Yeah, perfect. Or 800. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
4 calibrates, because we have enough relics where that is actually pretty decent. 4 crack the earths, which actually made for a very interesting market. This is the 5 cost market. 2 isolates, 3 pillar of progress, 2 Talir's favored, 2 unmake, 4 amber acolyte, 3 scorpion wasp, 1 turn back time, 3 ancestral oasis, 4 Shinra speaks, 4 age worn vestige, 4 Grodov stranger, 3 Nahid's distillations, 3 Zolta arcanum, 2 martyr's chains, 2 pit of Lanakta, and 1 fire sigil, 7 justice sigil, 6 time sigil, 4 Combre banner, 1 seed of glory, 2 seed of impulse, and 4 seed of progress. And in the market, ancient excavator to get back your relic weapons, to get back your relics, as well as potential ancestral oases should you sack them for the invoke. A Grodov's burden for some additional relic hate, as well as card draw is the primary reason, and occasionally the exalted comes into play. Hammer of glory, so you're able to take out opposing enemy sight. And believe it or not, limited all-star is actually quite good in this deck. Rage Heart Paladin, because of the fact that you're dropping 9 cost relics, which means this guy is sometimes a 4/11 lifesteal, which is hard for most aggro decks to take. And then, of course, Twin Brood Sauropod for the additional value out of the market, getting an Echo card. I did do some market swapping and juggling with that a couple times, and with Shinra Speaks, but most of the time you just go to the market once or twice. The good news is with Crack the Earth is that if you, and having access to 4 giant relics, that if you do get one in your opening hand or in the first couple of turns, then it's okay to go ahead and ship that to the market for a more applicable card now, because there's a higher chance that in the late game you will draw another one of those relics versus the first iteration where I was only running 2. 4 is that sweet spot where you're not getting them too often, but you're also know you are going to see at least one every game, if not 2. I did try to play Reality Breaker, what is it? Warden, thank you. Reality Warden was in the market as a 5 cost void hate, but the fact of the matter is, even though it is a 5 costed 7/7, it is still a unit. And the 2 decks that really went into the void and had a lot of void stuff going on had ways of removing a unit, so the card was very lackluster, and that's why I swapped it for the Hammer of Glory. Ancient Excavator obviously gave us a little bit of recursion, really good against the creation decks because it gives us a big blocker for their relic weapons, and it obviously gets back one of our things from their unmakes and whatnot. Grodov's Burden already absolutely amazing. I pretty much ran it out there with the spellcraft 98% of the time. That tuck spell is super powerful. I already talked about Rage Heart Paladin being a complete stop on most aggro decks. So yeah, the deck pretty much you just ramp early, control the board in the mid game until you're able to land either a Arcanum, a Martyr's Chains, or a Pit. Sometimes if you land 2 of them, you pretty much locked up the game. It's very hard pressed to lose. And then use Grodov Stranger as a ramp spell the majority of the time. Very rarely did I ever use it as a win condition. That is, the inclusion of Grodov Stranger is another way also to really smash and hurt the Xenon Stranger decks, because you wait till they play their Grodov Stranger, then you play yours, and now it ramps you from 6 to 8, potentially 9, and then you're so much quicker on your chains and Pit, which is just way bigger than anything they have going on. But yeah, that's it. I don't know, you guys got anything to add on it?
Yeah, Grodov's Burden was real good in this deck, not only as a great removal option from the market, but I saw you using the pay 5 to draw a card text on this multiple times. Just to keep the engine going. And then you also mentioned, Reality Warden. Another reason like that's not very necessary here is because Grodov Stranger's additional text lets you void hate, because why not?
Yep. And the Shinra Speaks, that's the other cool thing about ramping so much in this deck, is that the Grodov's Burden, there were several times where I've activated it more than once a turn, paid 10, draw 2 cards.
Yeah.
And because you ramp so much, you have the ability to potentially decimate Shinra Speaks early to silence everyone's units. So there are some times where you look at the board, you're like, I don't care if any of this comes back, so it's fine, and you just play it for full value. And there are times where it's like, oh, look, they have like 2 strangers and some void hate card or whatever. You're like, sweet, I'll just decimate it, because you're going to draw the power of the ramp to get back up there anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, deck was a ton of fun. I liked it. You're not too worried about Aegis because of the Scorpion Wasps. So, yeah, try it out. I think splashing the fire for Arcanum is really what set the deck apart. Honestly, it really helped me win a lot of games. You could do some absolutely ridiculous stuff with Bren in play, and then a Chains or a Pit. Like, you just kind of go off. It's crazy.
Yeah, and the power just flies out of your library.
Yeah.
When you've got an Arcanum in play and Grotto Stranger, like, oh my gosh.
Yep. One thing I will say, just for brewing purposes, for all those people out there, I did play around a little bit with having hourglasses in the deck, infinite hourglasses that you can ship to the market if you draw multiple. And the reason being is I'm starting to slowly but surely see a recursion of Permafrost and Spitfire Drake, right? So or Spit Flame. So the stun effects, that's a good way to negate it. But the other thing is, sometimes in testing, I found that the worms off of the pit were just one turn too slow, where I was like, man, I really could play this, but because they're exhausted and they can't block this turn, it's a little too slow. So I used Hourglass as a little bit of tech to negate that, and it actually did a lot of work, also allowing me to swing with my 7/7s without any kind of worry about leaving them back to block, because they were going to have endurance, and it forced my opponent to make some bad trades. But at the end of the day, the card just didn't have enough value, and like I said, adding fire was way better, especially the unmakes. There's a lot more 3-ofs in this deck than I anticipated, but you draw quite a few cards having the Nahid's Distillations and stuff like that. So the typical play for this deck would be, I think the most optimal would be a Pillar of Progress into an Ancestral Oasis into a Grotto Stranger, so you can either pit or Age Warden Vestige with Spellcraft. But you're perfectly okay also going a Talir's Favor or Amber Acolyte into a discounted Nahid's Distillation as well. All right, sweet.
Sweet deck. Good job, Order.
Yeah, you guys rock. Thank you guys so much for all the help. I really do appreciate it. Super proud of this deck, so you guys can check it out. Of course, the deck is in the show notes. So with that, guys, that leads us into our closing statements. So, John, do you have anything for our listeners before we sign off?
No, thanks for listening. Catch me in the usual places: Jedi's Discord, Farming Eternal Discord, Jedi's excellent stream on Twitch, and then I guarantee I will be doing some draft streaming this month.
Yes.
I promise.
Yes.
It's gonna happen. I almost did it today. I knew we had to record this, and I didn't want to cut it off early or anything like that. So, but sometime this month, maybe twice even. I promise. I actually spent a lot of time the other day troubleshooting my stream, and I don't know if I'm actually going to get to do it for my computer. I might have to just do it for my Xbox, which I know works fine, but I don't get to play music then. But yeah,
I think
some sacrifices must be made.
Yeah, I think I've seen Sonny stream on his Xbox, I think.
He actually just used to prefer playing with a controller. It was his computer he was streaming from at that time.
Oh, okay. All right, fair.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm used to the controller, but I've actually been playing more on my computer these days. But yeah, my stream setup is kind of busted right now. So yeah.
Fair. Alex, anything for our listeners?
No, hopefully you're adjusted to daylight savings at this point. And I'm in all the same places that John's at. And yeah, see you guys there.
Cool. All right, so the places you can catch these guys at are the Eternal Journey Discord, link down below. We have a fantastic community like we just talked about. It's really coming into fruition, guys. It's a great place for new players and experienced players to get together and share thoughts and ideas on deck brewing, draft picks, seal pools. We've been getting a lot of seal pool submissions, and that's absolutely a ton of fun, because I think breaking down seal pool is one of the funnest things to do, and you get good practice by breaking down other people's seal pools as well. Then, of course, you can catch us live every Sunday, Monday, Tuesday at twitch.tv/Jedi_EJ, where all three of us will be hanging out together and having some great shenanigans while you watch me punt. And if you cannot do that, then hey, catch us on YouTube, youtube.com/Eternal Journey. But all right, guys, that's going to do it for us. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you learned something in this level up episode and could take this to your further games to get some more wins under your belt. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, and we will see you next time. But until then, as always, happy gaming.
Bye.
Good luck in your draft queues, everyone.